I once spent an entire weekend writing what I still think is one of the best tutorials I've ever produced. Step by step, every parameter justified, every common mistake documented, the kind of thing I wished someone had handed me years earlier. I published it on a Sunday night feeling like I'd given a whole community a gift. 2 weeks later, I opened the analytics, 11 page views. 4 of them were mine. That same month, someone posted a rough, half-correct thread on the exact same topic, and it went everywhere. Screenshots showed up in Slack channels. People were quoting it back to me like I hadn't already said it. Better, first. My first reaction was the one every technically competent person has. The internet is broken, attention is stupid, and the wrong things win. My second reaction took a lot longer to show up, and it's the one that actually mattered. I had made something. I had not marketed it, and I had spent years quietly assuming those were the same activity. I'm Lei from Bullish Books, and today I want to talk about why so many genuinely talented people stay broke, while people who are objectively less skilled end up owning everything. By the end of this episode, you'll understand the one skill that separates an owner from an employee, the psychology behind why anyone changes their mind at all, and a handful of moves that work whether you have a marketing budget or you have exactly $0. Let's start with the ghostwriter problem, because it's the cleanest example I know of a smart person quietly making the wrong trade. There are ghostwriters out there earning a few cents a word on books that go on to sell hundreds of thousands of copies. The writing is theirs, the structure is theirs. Often the actual insight is theirs too, pulled out of the client over a series of interviews and shaped into something that actually reads well, and they hand over the entire upside for a flat fee. Why? Not because they can't write a book. They just wrote one. They hand it over because everything after the manuscript feels unbearable. Finding a publisher, building an audience, asking strangers for attention, putting your name on something that might fail in public. The writing is the part they love. The marketing feels like a toll booth, and rather than pay the toll, they sell the car. I watched a version of this play out constantly back when I was in computational biology. The person who wrote the analysis pipeline was almost never the person whose name opened doors. The junior researcher did the work. Late nights, real technical judgment, actual skill. The lab head did the talks, the introductions, the hallway conversations at conferences that turned into collaborations. Both people were doing real work. Only one of them was building something that compounds. Here's the uncomfortable conclusion I eventually landed on. A wage isn't payment for labor. It's payment for someone else handling distribution. And most of us take that deal at a serious discount because we've confused distribution with the ads we hate. So maybe the real question isn't whether marketing is distasteful. It's whether the thing we've been calling marketing is marketing at all. Here's the definition that changed everything for me. Marketing is the act of making change happen. That's the whole thing. You haven't marketed until someone thinks or acts differently than they otherwise would have. Nothing in that definition mentions money or attention or interruption. Under that definition, advertising is just one tactic, and a pretty desperate one, for buying a change you haven't otherwise earned. Which also means marketing isn't something a department does. It's something you've been doing since you were a teenager. You market yourself every time you apply for a job. A resume is a positioning document, a promise to one specific reader about a change you'll produce inside their company. The good ones are ruthlessly targeted at that one reader. The bad ones try to appeal to everyone, which is exactly why they end up sounding like nothing at all. When I used to teach, this hit me harder than anywhere else. You cannot force anyone to learn something. You can stand up there with a perfectly organized, technically correct explanation and watch it fail completely, because the person in front of you hasn't decided yet that they want what you're holding. The sessions that worked were never the ones with the cleanest slides. They were the ones where I opened with a problem someone in the third row was already stuck on. I wasn't simplifying content. I was earning the right to be listened to, which is a marketing problem wearing a teacher's clothes. The same thing happens sideways in a lab, or honestly, in any team. If you want a group to adopt a better way of doing something, being right is only the entry fee. You have to make the current way feel unacceptable to someone who's already busy, already competent, and already invested in the thing you want them to give up. I've watched better methods lose that fight over and over, and it was never the methods that lost. So the choice was never whether to learn marketing. I'd been doing it badly for 15 years. The only real choice is whether to do it on purpose. And doing it on purpose starts with understanding why people actually change their minds in the first place. Here's the part I wish someone had told me first, because everything else in this episode follows from it. Culture doesn't shift because you're right. If being right were sufficient, we'd have adopted every better idea the moment it appeared. Culture shifts when status shifts. But status isn't one thing, and confusing the two versions of it gets expensive fast. Some people keep score vertically. Their questions are about rank and power. Is this mine or yours? Did I win? Others keep score horizontally. Their questions are about belonging. Who else is here? Am I in sync with my people? A huge amount of internet culture runs on this second kind, which is why so much marketing effort goes towards showing that the right people have already shown up. The trap is assuming your audience keeps score the way you do. I made a version of that mistake for years. I write for people who want to understand mechanisms, because that's how I keep score personally. But a meaningful share of my actual readers just wanted to avoid looking clueless in front of their own supervisor. That's a status need, and it wasn't the one I was serving. Nothing about my content had to change. The opening paragraphs did. Knowing what someone wants still isn't enough to move them, though. People stay put by default, because the current arrangement, however bad, is already survivable. What produces motion is tension. And I want to be precise here, because tension sounds close to manipulation, and it isn't the same thing at all. Fear paralyzes people. It puts them in suspended animation, holding their breath. Tension is the feeling of standing at a threshold, aware that something might work and might not, aware that you don't yet know the thing you're about to know. Every good teacher creates this, which is honestly how I finally made peace with it. Right before you learn something, you become conscious that you don't know it yet. And that gap is uncomfortable in a way that produces movement. Naming a specific thing your listener can't yet do isn't a trick played on them. It's a form of respect because it treats them as someone capable of crossing the gap. But tension by itself just produces anxiety. The counterweight is trust. Your listener needs to believe the gap is real, and believe that the person pointing at it won't leave them stranded inside it. Tension gives the reason to move. Trust gives the permission. Neither one works alone. Show someone a gap with no trust attached, and they close the tab feeling worse than when they arrived. And underneath all of it, we buy feelings, not features. Belonging, control, safety, respect, freedom, being seen as capable. The list is actually short, which is oddly encouraging, because a small palette is enough to paint almost anything. I don't sell tutorials. I sell the feeling of walking into a meeting with your own analysis done, having done it yourself, and not needing to apologize to anyone. The content is just the delivery mechanism for that feeling. Status, tension, trust, and feeling. That's the entire engine, and it runs the same way whether you've got $1 billion or a laptop. What differs is only what each budget can afford to do with it, and it's worth looking at what the big budget actually buys before you try to copy it. Watch an old soda commercial and count the product claims. Nobody's telling you about the ingredients. You're shown people having a better time than you are, and the association being built isn't between the drink and thirst. It's between the drink and being the kind of person who belongs in that scene. That's affiliation purchased at scale. Apple's famous 1984 Super Bowl ad is the purest version I know. It aired once, mentioned no specification of the computer it was advertising, and simply signaled to a small number of media people and tech enthusiasts that there was a side to be on. Neither ad was selling anything in the usual sense. Both were moving feelings, which is the only lever that ever shifts a market. And here's the distinction that matters for what you and I can actually afford. There are two completely different activities hiding under the word marketing. Direct response can be measured this afternoon. Someone clicked, someone bought. The math works or it doesn't. Brand marketing can't be measured at all. It's the slow accumulation of every interaction, how you answer an email, whether you reply to a comment 2 years after you posted it. It took Apple 30 years to convert a signal sent to 1 million people into one of the most valuable companies on earth. The signal wasn't the asset, the 30 years were. And here's the caveat worth remembering before you try to copy any of it. That tribe is never yours. You don't own the people who gather around your work, you only earn the right to be missed if you left. Here's the actual problem with copying the big brand playbook, though. None of it scales down. If you copy the tactics of an organization whose real assets are reach and patience, you'll spend money you don't have buying attention you can't convert. The small operation has to run this exact same engine, just in reverse. So instead of asking how many people you could possibly reach, ask the opposite question. What's the smallest number of people you'd need to serve properly for this to be worth doing? There are online businesses out there serving fewer than 10 customers that comfortably fund their owners' lives. A former colleague of mine runs a subscription platform teaching a fairly narrow technical skill with a team of 3 and a few thousand subscribers. Neither of us has a brand in the Coca-Cola sense. Both are indispensable to a specific group, which turns out to be worth more than being vaguely known to everyone. Chasing mass makes you boring, and it has to. Mass means average, and average means saying nothing anyone ever repeats to a friend. 4 questions get you to your smallest viable market, and they're worth writing down, because vague answers are how this exercise quietly dies. What change am I making, stated specifically enough that you could actually verify it happened? What's the minimum number of people for whom that change has to happen? Because if the honest answer is 300 listeners, everything you do to reach 3 million is wasted motion. What do those people already believe in their words, not yours, since you can't afford to argue with what's already installed in someone's head? And who's at the extreme edge, the corner of the market underserved to the point of real frustration, the group you can serve until you're not the better option anymore. You're the only sane one. Demographics tell you what someone is. You need to know what someone wants, which is why it helps to write out 2 or 3 personas with actual names and internal monologues. One of mine, back in my old world, was a second-year student handed a hard drive of data and an expectation, frightened of looking incompetent, needing a small win before Thursday. Another already knew the subject cold and mainly resented depending on other people for basic help. Those 2 need completely different opening lines on the exact same material. Once you know who you're actually talking to, the tactics stop being a menu and start being obvious applications of everything we just covered. Tell stories instead of specifications, because people remember what happened to them, not parameters. The stuff of mine that actually traveled was never the most complete version. It was the version that opened with a specific embarrassing failure. That costs nothing to tell and does 2 jobs at once. It makes the listener feel seen and proves you've actually been where they are. Be unbeatable in a very small world instead of mediocre in a giant one. Nobody needs another general resource on a broad topic. There are plenty already. And you'd lose that fight in a week. But you can be the single best resource in existence for one very specific person in one very specific situation, because the people who could out-technical you have zero interest in writing for that reader. Sell the transformation, not the tool. If you can't state the feeling on the far side of your work in one sentence, you're still selling features. Send signals that say, "This is for you," because busy people scan rather than study, and give away ideas while charging for the expression of them. Free behaves differently from cheap because free divides by 0 and scales to infinity in a way a priced idea never will. But you can't eat attention, so run both, deliberately paired. The recipe is free. The meal on the tablecloth costs money. Those moves get you found by the right people. Something different has to happen for that to actually turn into a business, because being found once isn't worth very much on its own. Free content, done right, produces 3 things at once: awareness, permission, and trust. Awareness is the cheap one. Permission is the privilege of sending anticipated personal messages to people who'd actually notice and be a little concerned if you stopped. Not people whose contact info you acquired somewhere, people who'd write and ask where you went. You earn that slowly, and then you keep the deal exactly as made. Remarkability is what fills that permission asset up, and the crucial thing is that it isn't your call to make. If people talk about it, it's remarkable. If they don't, it isn't, no matter how hard the work was. People rarely share things because you impress them. They share because sharing says something flattering about their own taste. Trust is the input both of those depend on, and it comes from what you do, not what you say. We remember what you did long after we've forgotten what you said. My version of building this is answering the emails from people who are genuinely stuck. It doesn't scale, and that's precisely why it works. No ad campaign produces the effect of one real answer to one real person on a Wednesday night. If you want something more formal than a mental checklist, there's a simple structure I use instead of a traditional business plan, and its virtue is that it's hard to fake. Write down the truth, the world as it actually is, no spin. Write down your assertions, what you'll actually do to change that, stated plainly enough that you'll know later whether you were right. Write down the alternatives, because some of your assertions will be wrong, so which parts can flex without the whole thing collapsing? And write down the people and the money who's actually doing this and what it costs. Notice that almost all of that is just the psychology we already covered, written down honestly instead of dressed up for a pitch deck. One last thing has to be true before any of this works, and it's the thing I most needed to hear back when I was sitting on that 11-page view tutorial. Perfect closes the door, it asserts you're finished, and worse, it forbids you from trying again because aiming at perfect and missing gets quietly redefined as failure. Perfectionism looks like high standards, and it very often functions as fear wearing better clothes. Good enough isn't a shortcut, it's a starting position. Good enough gets engagement. Engagement earns trust. Trust lets you see the people you're serving, and seeing them lets you make a real promise, which is the only thing that's ever earned enrollment. Ship it, then improve it. Shipping was never the risky part. Waiting was. So here's where I'll leave you this week. Write down the specific change you're trying to make in someone's life, specific enough that you could verify whether it happened. Write down the smallest number of people for whom that change has to happen for this to be worth your time. Write down what those people already believe, want, and fear in their words, not yours. Find one thing you can give away that would genuinely help them and publish it. Build one direct line to the people it reaches, one that you actually own rather than rent from someone else's platform, and then show up again next week, then 50 more times after that. The ghostwriter who never claims the profit on her own book isn't short on talent. She's short one decision. Not the decision to write, she's clearly already made that one, but the decision to do the second half of the job, find the specific people who need what she makes, tell them a true story about it, and keep showing up until they'd notice if she stopped. I skipped that second half for years, and I had the page view numbers to prove it. The work was never the problem. If this got you thinking about something you built that nobody ever found, head over to bullishbooks.com and read the full breakdown. It goes even deeper into the psychology behind all of this than I could fit into one episode, including a business plan template you can actually use. I'm Lei, this has been Bullish Books, and I'll catch you in the next one. If you got something out of this, subscribe. It genuinely helps more than you'd think.